Mystery Writers, welcome to Mystery Fix. I'm Zara Altair, and this is where we talk about writing a great mystery, writing a killer mystery. So, today I want to revisit managing your scenes, because scenes are the building blocks of your story. And each scene moves the story forward. And as you build your story, you want to alternate between action and reaction scenes. So when you go through the first edits of your story, you want to make certain that all the scene components are in each scene. And this way you take your reader by the hand and lead them through the story. So let's talk about the two types of scenes. They go by different names, but you can alternate between proactive and reactive scenes in a cycle that builds your story in increments. The proactive scene challenges your protagonist. He has a goal. She tries to achieve that goal, but obstacles challenge her as the scene moves forward, and at the end of the scene there's a setback. And by the end of the scene, the protagonist has not only failed to reach his goal, but has a setback that leaves him worse off than at the beginning. So let's talk about the checklist for the proactive scene. So you can keep these in mind while you're writing, but the best way to do this is when you go back through your first edits and look at each scene and go through your checklist to make sure all the elements are there. So who has the primary point of view? Which character has that point of view? And you want to stay with that one point of view throughout the scene. No what's called head jumping. And then of course the next is, what is the goal, and does the reader know that goal? Is it somehow stated in the scene? And keep the goal for the scene simple. It's a small part of the story. So we've got one goal, one thing to accomplish in this one scene, and then create the objective of the goal so the reader can visualize the success. Okay, when I'm done with this, thanks, your sleuth, this is going to happen, and the reader's right along with them. And then here's one of your first edit choices, and that is make the goal worthwhile, because otherwise just cut the scene. If it's just if nothing is happening, you really want to double check that scene. You probably want to cut it. You can take parts of the scene and put them in other scenes, but you want it to be worthwhile, because remember, the goal of each scene is to move the story forward, and you're working in increments, and those increments are your scenes. And make the goal achievable in the protagonist's view. The protagonist believes that she has all the skills to make this happen, and then set up those challenges and make it difficult to achieve that goal. What your protagonist thought was going to be, he's going to carry all his skills in and he's going to accomplish that, and then, whoa, there's all these things get in your sleuth's way, and they create conflict. So make sure that there's conflict to keep your hero from reaching the goal. And even with obstacles, don't let the protagonist give up. Okay, if the protagonist gives up, whoops, your story is kind of not going forward. So you can think about giving up, but you can't give up no matter what the obstacles are, especially in the second part of the middle and in your final section. Don't let the protagonist give up. And make the obstacles unexpected. Your sleuth isn't expecting them, but keep them logical within the story. So just the way a deus ex machina doesn't work at the end of a story, even within scenes, you want to keep those obstacles logical. So one of the things you can think about when you're reviewing your scenes is to put your hero or heroine in the worst possible situations as they seek what seems like an attainable goal. So you're going to move through these proactive scenes with the sleuth starting out thinking they're going to accomplish their goal, and then obstacles come up and it doesn't quite happen for this sleuth. Things that they didn't expect happen to keep them from reaching the goal within the scene. Okay, now let's look at the reactive scene. And now that your protagonist is thwarted, it's time to give him some space. And you're doing this for the reader as well, because if you have action scene, proactive scene after proactive scene after proactive scene, your reader's going to get tired. So slow it down, give them some space, and this scene is where your hero or heroine makes a decision about what to do next. So the action in these reactive scenes is really the decision making. So start with your protagonist's reaction to what just happened. And now get your hero to figure out what his options are. Can he do this? Can he do that? And if the setback was significant, he may have no apparent options, and he needs to look at his dilemma and choose an option. So this can be some major choices, just depending on where you are in the story. And in the final portion of this reactive scene, the protagonist makes a decision. And that decision is the goal for the next scene, which is a proactive scene. So if you alternate, you give your reader some strong pacing to keep them turning the pages. So let's look at a checklist for the reactive scene. Clarify the protagonist's vision of the problem. She needs to know what the problem is before she can make a decision. So she's got to look at what just happened and figure out exactly what it was that went wrong. And keep the reader with your protagonist by visualizing what the character will do next. They run through some scenarios, and the decision for the next action should be in line with the character's personality and values. So it's internal. It comes from inside your protagonist's thinking and actions. And then show how the protagonist sees success from his decision, because you're setting up now for the next proactive scene. You want to get your protagonist seeing that this is going to work. And then, but make the decision difficult enough that the reader has doubts about whether your character can do what she decides to do. Reactive scenes are really important because they provide a way for your character to make really bad decisions, which will create even greater conflict later on. She may be blind to the motivation of another character. She may find that getting into the boardroom isn't a slam dunk. Reactive scenes are your opportunity to build conflict and tension, because the following action scene may be based on the very wrong decision that seemed right at the time. So why does this structure help? For beginning writers, all this alternating of scenes may seem forced, And I know I was as a beginning writer and thought the same way, but my stories went nowhere and lacked tension. And you want that tension? You want to keep your readers reading. And readers want and expect your characters to have problems and to overcome those problems and obstacles. So unless you're very compulsive, you don't need to write these lists down. Just know which type of scene you're writing and create the obstacles either to action or decision. Those are your two key points. Proactive is action, reactive is decision. And write the scene, and your story will benefit and your readers will love your story. So, scene editing when your story is finished. Once you've written each scene with all the writer passion that you hold, now you want to go back and edit your story with a clear, logical eye. So, is your scene written from that one point of view? Is it an action scene or a reaction or a reactive scene? And you want to make that really clear within the context of the scene. And then, does the reader know where the characters are? So you want to set grounds for the reader and get them grounded in that scene. And does the scene include at least 3 of the 5 senses? All 5 is even better. But touch, sight, hearing, taste, smell, use at least 3 in every scene because these details help bring the reader directly into the story. And do you crank up the conflict? Either action or decision to the highest point. Make it the most difficult in action and the most complicated in finally coming to a decision. So make it tough. Make it really tough for your character. And practice story editing with an objective eye. And kind of take off your creative hat and become more objective and logical. We want to be as unbiased as possible about the elements of each scene and use your critical mind to objectify the story. I think of it as switching from story creator, the one who loves the story, to a person who's looking at a thing, an object, and use whatever mind tricks work for you so you can be as objective as possible with your own work. Do this work on your story and scene structure before you send it to an editor. This is part of your personal editing step before you send it off for that professional editor's eye. Some writers completely switch into editing mode and stop writing during the process. I personally do some of that, but I like to balance editing and writing, so I do some of each during the editing process. But find out what method works for you. Some people like to just write heads on without thinking about any editing or thinking about scene elements and do I have 5 senses in here and all of that stuff. And some writers bounce back and forth. It's really up to you and your writing style. But when it comes to reviewing your story, reviewing your scenes, your proactive scene for action and your reactive scene for decision making and keeping them alternating in your story is going to help you write the best mystery possible. Okay, thanks a lot, and I will see you next time.